Happy Thursday, September 11th. I'm told people don't know what day it is. So it's that kind of weird beginning of the school year where days are just sort of melding together. Please stay healthy out there. A lot of folks are not feeling well, including one of our panelists who wasn't able to make it. So hopefully we'll get her on here another time. Before we get any further into that, let me just formally introduce this week's panel. What doors could open if you launched your book with a strategy, not just a release date? Today's panelists are two entrepreneurs who didn't just publish a book, they launched it with intention. Each followed my launch strategies to build a launch team filled with likely prospects and referral partners, host a high impact launch event, and turn their book into a business asset. The results speak for themselves. Each author received between 71 and 77 Amazon reviews, which is incredible. And nearly every reader left not just a star rating, but a written review. This level of engagement sets a book up for long-term discoverability and gives the author more credibility. If you're wondering what your book could do for your brand, let's talk. You can schedule a complimentary 30-minute book launch brainstorming session at booklaunchbrainstorm.com. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to two of my clients and friends. And in this conversation, they're going to share what worked, what surprised them, and how following my launch strategy opened doors in their business. With me today, I have Sophie Lechner, who wrote Unlock Your Impact, the Roadmap to Magnetic Client Attraction for Entrepreneurs Who Hate Marketing, a refreshing guide for mission-driven entrepreneurs who want to attract clients naturally by leading with purpose instead of self-promotion and transform marketing from a dreaded task into a joyful extension of their impact. And we have Stacey Larsen, who wrote Reframing the Leadership Dance, the secret to finding your rhythm as a people leader, exploring innovative leadership approaches. It emphasizes the importance of adaptability and self-discovery in fostering effective leadership practices and navigating complex organizational landscapes. Please join me in welcoming Sophie and Stacey. Sophie, I'm going to jump right over to you. Just give us a little more background about who this book is for. I mean, we talked about people who hate marketing and we talked about mission-driven entrepreneurs, but like, what do you mean by that?
Right. So a lot of coaches, entrepreneurs, consultants, professionals, a lot of people who go into business for themselves do it out of generosity because they want to share their lived experience, their qualifications, all of that they have to share. But they don't really like the whole idea of having the spotlight on themselves. And so when they start to realize that they have to do marketing, it feels really unnatural to them and yucky, and they see themselves as this sales car, salesman, and there's just all of this that comes up, this fear of visibility and all of that. And what that results in is that they just don't like the marketing, they don't want to do it. When they do it, it's just like this thing on their checklist, and they're just not engaged. And as the potential clients, we feel this energy if somebody doesn't want to be there, especially on a call, right? So this book is about doing marketing in a way that is completely different. It's not this putting the spotlight on yourself. It's putting the spotlight on your mission, your bigger vision, why you're here. And it helps you to really embody the boldness of what you want to do in the world and how you want to impact people. And so there's a whole bunch of strategies in there and exercises, and it's really a how-to guide as well as a sort of different philosophy and approach to marketing.
I was just having a conversation with a prospect yesterday who had a lot of that angst that you were just describing. And like, it was in relation to asking people to even be on her launch team. Like, she'd written a book. The book was about to be published. It was designed, it was ready to go. Someone referred her to me. She realized she was supposed to have a plan. And she just was like, oh, but I don't know. I don't think I really know anyone who wants to help me in that way. I mean, that's a lot. You're asking of people. I mean, I don't feel like be bothering. I'm like, is the book you wrote valuable? like how would that book help people? I basically pointed out to her that she was gatekeeping.
Yeah.
Her emotional angst was gatekeeping and preventing people who needed her message from getting it. And I like paused and I could see that it landed a little bit. And then I gave her some space to talk about it. But I was like, none of the strategies are going to help you if you don't change that mindset. So I love this book that you wrote because I really
Yeah.
think you have to meet people where they are, and guide them to realizing that there's
Mhm.
more they could offer. And marketing is not like this negative thing. It's an
Yeah.
invitation. So thank you for writing this book. Let's go over to Stacey. So Stacey, you use the term people leader and in your title, and I'm kind of curious, what do you mean by this? What kind of organizations are you working with? I love the dance metaphor. Like, who's this book for?
Yeah. I tend to work with senior leaders and middle level leaders in small and mid sized companies, not the folks who have a whole HR and learning and development team behind them in corporate and have all those things. It's folks who are super smart, who are amazing leaders. They love getting into leadership. They wanted to do it. They're wanting to have an impact on people, right? They get that relationships are important and they've been doing great things. And they're also super responsible. And so the leaders that I tend to work with are the people who have their 21 competencies that they're supposed to be working on, and they're going to try to do them all, and they're going to be present, and they're going to be vulnerable, and they're going to do all the things that everyone tells them they should be doing, except for some reason it's not working with this person, or for some reason they're not getting the results that they want, or for some reason they continue to feel like they have to have difficult conversations, and those difficult conversations aren't getting easier. So my book is really about, let's make it simpler. It doesn't have to be 21 competencies. It doesn't have to be working so hard. A lot of these folks end up being seen as micromanagers because when they get frustrated, they end up putting more time, effort, and energy into the relationship than the other person. So, how do we not overlead? And my book breaks it down into 4 steps. It takes all the best practices in leadership and says, you don't have to do this as an individual leader out to people. What you need to do is dance with each person and just make sure you have these 4 steps, and you will have presence, and you will have connection, and you will have alignment, and you'll have accountability. So how do we back up and learn how to do that and get our habits to align with it?
I'm now waiting for you to come out with a version for parents of young children. As I'm
It's a
listening
good
to this,
point.
I've heard you describe your book before, but as you're saying this, I'm thinking about my relationship with my own children, and I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. They're unique. What works for one doesn't always work for the other. I think I've nailed it, and then I have a different conversation. And I realize I've totally missed the boat, and it's not working out. And I can see this like, I both of you are striving to reach smart, motivated people, and I think there's something there because it's different to reach out to someone who has already got a lot going for them but wants to do it better versus people who are like just not trying like at all. Like that's a very different audience to reach. But both of you are like, these are people who are doing the work. They've got, in Sophie's case, they've got a business, they're running it. They just best kept secret maybe. Like they should have a better name recognition or brand recognition. And Stacey, similar to you, like, these are people who are out there leading. They generally enjoy it except for those few people that they don't. And it's like, well, how do I fix this? And both of you, this is your first book. And I want to go to Sophie. Like, how do you get over the angst of writing a book? I mean, did you have that like inner voice moment where it's like, well, who am I to write a book? I feel it's super common. Like, what was the motivation, and how did you get to the point where you actually have this book in your hand? Because talking about a book is different than
Mm.
having this book in your hand. Like, congratulations on getting to this point.
Yeah,
After the
thank
book
you.
part.
Yeah, I feel that now that I've written one book, I'm just like I can't stop. I'm writing other books, and that it completely changes everything. But yes, writing the first book, so this wasn't in my plans to write a book. It was just that when I did the work to try to figure out what I was doing with my clients that was so different from other people, they kept telling me what you're doing is different. I was like, oh, okay, I didn't quite realize that necessarily. So when I did the hard work of going back and figuring out what it was that I was doing that was different, and when I was able to put it in these 9 strategies and create a whole model, the magnet model, the name of my company, to put them into a model, and I started using that with my clients, then everybody around me started telling me, well, you need to write a book. You got to put this in a book. You have to write a book. So I was like, okay, write a book, you know? And I didn't have that much. Yes, I did have moments where I was writing something and all of a sudden I would feel like, but who are you to say that? You know, like who says that you're entitled to, say things about marketing that are the opposite of what everybody around you is saying? But but I had the strength of the conviction, so I didn't have too much of that. And the way I was able to get it done is it was very slow at first, and it was just really not progressing in the way that I like things to progress. So I shut down. Well, I didn't shut down, but like I cut everything out of my calendar and said, okay, the next few months until this is done, this is all I'm doing. So
Mm.
minimum client calls, minimum of everything. And then the rest of the day was writing. The weekend was writing, all Saturday, all Sunday. I mean, it was, I went into my cave. And that's how I got it done. In 3 months, it was finished. So yeah, different.
Yeah, and I think part of what I'm going to pull from that is people already were familiar with your work. In fact, they were the ones telling you that
Yeah.
this is great and
Mm.
that you should create it as a book so people can access it.
Mhm.
And so it's different from someone who's like, well, I think I know something that no one else knows, so I'm going to write about it, but no
Mm.
one else knows
Mm.
that it's good or bad. Like they've never
Yeah.
experienced it. Like you had the pull from your
Mm.
community to do this. So at least you had that's that conviction you were feeling. But even with
Mhm.
all that, like you said, you still had to clear your calendar and be really focused and like make the real effort.
Mm.
And it wasn't like in a weekend, it was months of hard work and
Yeah.
iteration and editing and nailing it down. Um,
Mhm.
if I recall, you got help coming up with this model, and could you just talk a little bit about how you approach that? Because both of you
Mhm.
have a framework that or a
Mhm.
model that your book is designed around, and I
Mhm.
feel like a lot of authors come to have that model because of a book. Like they were doing something without it having a full name or spelled out steps.
Mhm.
So how did you figure out this or distill this idea of what you did differently to something you could write
Yes.
in a book?
So I had come across this gentleman called Simon Bowen from Australia some years back, and I had been just blown away by his brilliance and his ability to translate ideas into models. And I had been following him and just sort of drooling at the idea of ever signing up for one of his programs. And what he does is he helps you to figure out the genius of what it is that you do. I mean, that's his genius. So I never thought I would, sign up. But then when I realized, oh, that's the problem I have, yay, I can, I know exactly the guy. So I signed up for his program, which, took a bit of a toll on my finances, but it was the best investment I ever made because that was a lot of really, really hard thinking. It really pushes you intellectually to fit your ideas into these small,
Yeah.
labels, and it's really a lot of hard thinking. My head was hurting when I was doing it, but once I had the model, everything changed. And you're right, a lot of times you can write and the model comes out of your writing, and I did refine the model as I was writing, but I did have, the 3 key drivers, the 9 strategies, the model was there, and then I just had to write it.
Yeah. No, that's great. Getting that outside support, knowing, recognizing that you needed that. And then Stacey, this leadership dance model, this metaphor that you use, I mean, it's interesting because it wasn't like you've been using it all along. Like it was funny because it's the work you were doing. You just hadn't been using that particular metaphor, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah,
So how did you arrive at that? Was that through the writing process as well?
it was definitely through the writing process. I am a person who uses metaphors all the time. So as I was collecting stories and collecting things I wanted to say in the book and putting chapters together, I used so many metaphors that the editor that I was working with was like, "What are you doing? Like you have these all over the place, and you're using things. Um, you're using a ship, and you're using this, and you're using water, and you're using all these stories. What are you really trying to do?" And I kept explaining why I think leadership development today, where they're missing the mark, and how I'm different. That's the other question they kept asking me. I said, I'm different because everyone else is telling leaders what they must do, which is a push out model. Leaders must do this competency and this competency and this competency. I said, that's not what I teach anymore. I used to teach that. And then I learned that you can do that your whole career and be pretty successful. But where the people I was working with were successful is when it wasn't a, I'm doing this to get people on board, I'm doing this to get people to be accountable. Instead, we were, oh, with this person, I'm having conversations about how they will be accountable. With this person, I am having conversations around how are we showing up together, not you need to show up better. You need to be more respectful. And what kind of conversations we're having. And through talking about that with my editor, it was like, oh, so it's like a dance. Well, yes, it is. And then the more and more we played with it, the more we realized we could use that metaphor throughout the whole book, throughout the whole framework. And it finally all tied together where all the metaphors I was using before kind of failed at one point or another.
This is one of the reasons you have to hire people who know a thing or two about what they're doing and are
Mhm.
willing to have these conversations with authors, like push back a little bit in a loving way, or a direct way, or the way that needs to be heard by the author. Because otherwise, honestly, you would have just printed that book. Like
Yeah,
the original draft with all the mixed metaphors, the
great.
shark and the ship and the water and the dancing and the I don't know, the hula hoop. There would be all these different metaphors floating around, and you would have thought this is a great book. Look at me, I'm explaining every step of the way exactly what I mean. But you could hire. I just want to point out that you could have found someone, and I don't want to like disparage like Fiverr and Upwork, but you could find someone who's just paid to kind of like make sure the comma's in the right place and not look in this bigger picture way at the book and like what are you trying to do? It's like asking that question a few times to get you to focus and get that clarity. So getting the right kind of outside support is really important. Sophie, what did you want to add to this?
I love the way you describe this, Stacey, because I feel like this whole idea of these are the principles, these are the things you need to do. That's exactly what marketing, the marketing that I'm against, does. And people try to follow these formulas. And the way you describe how you work with leaders is exactly the way I would love people to work with the principles in my book. I always say this is not a book about how to do marketing. It's a book about how to discover what marketing you need to be doing in order for it to be successful. So I love I'll re-listen to this and hear how you describe it because that's great. And the other thing I wanted to say is in the same way as you find a good editor, my beta readers made such a difference to me. Honestly, the book is a million times better than it was initially. And one of my beta readers said to me, you're telling us your story in the beginning. And then when you start explaining the strategies, we don't hear about you anymore. So tell us how did you apply this strategy? So you can imagine like the whole entire book, I had to add this, add this, add that. It went from like 35,000 to 50,000. So it took a lot of work, but I think it made a huge difference because people tell me all the time, like, we see you, like you tell us something and then you tell us how it worked for you, and it makes all the difference. So it's so important to be surrounded by your team.
Yeah, people
You
who
know
get
how
it.
to-
I have another observation for both of you. So interesting that you're both on this panel. You both have a contrarian point of view to establish protocols in your fields. You've done the established protocols. You understand the rules as they're laid out, the agreed upon principles. You understand when and how they could work. And you also understand their limitations. And you don't want the people you're serving to feel that they have to only pick from column A and column B. If column A and column B aren't serving you, then let's go explore the rest of the alphabet. There's got to be more here for you, and how to think critically and have your own strategic sense of what's necessary as opposed to just following this formula that's laid out by someone. So I love that you both found a voice that separates you, because there are other books on leadership. There are other books on marketing, right? Like, how do you write something that has some meaning and adds to the discourse? So I think that's really great. And also, Stacey, I know people say all the time that they hear your voice from reading the book. So what Sophie was just saying, could you just add on a little bit to how do you brought your voice into this, and how have readers responded to the fact that you brought yourself into the story?
Yeah, I think there's two things that are my biggest takeaways around that in writing the book and in listening to beta readers and my editor. I think the first one is I would tell stories, but I was very careful and reluctant because in coaching, we want to keep things confidential. We want to protect people. We don't want anyone to feel like they have been outed with things they struggle with in the world. And so I needed to nudge myself to create amalgamations of my case studies and the clients that I talked about and look at the themes in order to feel more comfortable giving more details and more ways that the beta readers and the readers now can identify with those circumstances. And so that was a nudge for me, because I was like, oh, I can say this much. That's fine. But no, I needed to make it more connection orientated and really help them feel that. And for that, I created those amalgamation characters. The other thing I think about with the voice is my clients always tell me that once they work with me, they hear my voice in their head. So, because we talk about these moments in your daily routine where they're shift moments, there's shift moments. Where can I do a different step in the dance than I do if I'm in reaction mode? And they hear me in order to catch themselves and stop and do a different step. And what was missing for me in my marketing and in my book sales was people who didn't know me couldn't hear my voice. They didn't know what that was like. And clients would always say how shocked they were at what the work actually was to work with me versus what they thought coaching was. So part of the impetus in my book is to get my voice out there and help people who have never met me before to hear who I am, hear how I work, get to know that and feel like, oh, I want some of that, and come into the coaching process with a little more awareness of what that work might be like versus starting from scratch.
What I love about this for both of you, and it's a lot of what I try to do with my books as well, is that I want to educate prospects about my process, because the more educated they are, the better quality conversation we have when we have that initial, like, is this a fit? They are like probably already leaning towards the idea that this process could work for them, but they just don't know if they could do it on their own, which is great. And they also can see how maybe what I do is different. Like the same thing for both of you, like how what you're offering is a little different. And their understanding of, for instance, what a coach might be is not how you show up. And I also wanted to circle back to give Sophie public praise yet again for being one of my beta readers, because you made that comment earlier, and I can't let this go. So I learned a real lesson with this last book. I wrote a book called Launch Your Book, An Entrepreneur's Guide to Reviews that Drive Revenue. And it's a book about launching a book. And Sophie, you had just gone through my online program and followed on my process, and you're part of my content connection club. So you came to our masterminds to, get a hot seat or two as you were going through the process. So you were really freshly through that material. And so I had asked you, I asked 2 publishers that I know to look at it, and my wife. My wife always reads my books, and she's actually an interesting person because she knows little to nothing about the topics that I write about. So her perspective is actually really refreshing because she's the one who says things like, "Wait, what is it? What does hybrid mean in the context of publishing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I have to go through the entire book and find all the words that I'd left undefined." Like,
Mhm.
and I basically turned to AI and I was like, "Can you find me a list of words that I should probably define?" And like, I went back in and I filled it all in. So that was useful. The publishers, including my editor, who helps people with publishing, they were too close to the material in some ways to give me the nuanced feedback that Sophie provided. And so I restructured things, reorganized, and it was such a rich conversation. And I felt like it was an incredible gift, the amount of effort she put in. So Sophie, whatever you've done to get support from your beta readers, know you're paying it forward as well, and it will come back to you again. But getting the right kind of person, because if they just, like Stacey, if your editor had just said yes to you, that wouldn't have led to a great book. If all of my beta readers had just been like, "Oh, blowing smoke, Robbie, it looks great," like let's just go with it, then the book won't improve. So I think as authors, we both have strong opinions about our content, but we also have to be open to that feedback and that process. Part of why I was excited that you two randomly ended up on a panel together based on your availability is because you both had incredible success. It's very rare that I have two clients on who both have had over 70 written reviews from their launch. In fact, I can't think of another time where this has happened. And I work with authors and I say, the goal is to get 50 or more written reviews. So clearly you both blew those metrics way out of the water. And we talked a little bit, Sophie, about how you approached your sort of DIY, following my process, working with me a little bit through the mastermind. Stacey, I'd love to hear how you came to the realization that the launch was a process that you didn't have a plan for, and decided to work together and create that plan. So the book was well underway when you and I first had a conversation. Tell us a little bit how you sort of morphed into this plan.
I had been working with my editor, and I self-published through Amazon, through KDP, and we were getting ready to launch. Except when the conversation shifted from writing the book to launching, there didn't seem to be anything there. So I happened to be on one of the thought leader panels or networking opportunities that you were leading, Robbie. And I was saying this, like, who else has, done a book? Like, is this normal? Like, this just feels like nothing's happening here. Like, I'm going to launch this and they're going to make it live. And then what? It feels like, what, are my friends and family just going to like it? Like, and what's happening? And Robbie, you very generously said, let's talk after the meeting. And you gave me so much education in a half an hour, I think it was, around how I could launch differently, how I could take my network, which is actually really large. I have a network of 500 ish people that I could list out saying that they would support me. They're my champions, they're my advocates in business and in personal life and in other ways. And you talked to me about how we could not focus in on when it goes live on Amazon, but focus in on a launch whereby all these people could be brought together to celebrate the opening and be ushered through a process to read the book in advance, to write reviews, and how I could do that without going crazy and spending oodles and oodles of time. And I left that 30-minute conversation with, I have to hire Robbie to do my launch, not only for those reasons, but because those of you watching who know Robbie's magnetic, and he MCs a launch like nobody's business. And he is so fun. And all my people who came to that launch to this day tell me how energizing you were and how amazing that launch was and how they felt so a part of it. And so I fell into it by accident. I found you and you helped me launch the book successfully and get those 78 reviews. And I was floored at what I could do that I didn't even know I could.
Yeah, I remember we met Friday was like a networking call. There was like a lull in the conversation. I said, "Who's got a book coming out this year?" And that's how we got into that path. And we stayed after for a little bit. And so, why don't we schedule a follow up on Tuesday? Which, note to self, always do that, right? Like, oh, if someone's like excited to talk to you, like, when's the next follow up? And by Tuesday, you were like, "Okay, I've thought about it. I've had these other questions." And then next, you know, we were working together. I think, Sophie, you've been, hearing me talk about this. This is all before the book was out for me. Like, I didn't have the book to teach people these principles. And so I was just meeting with people. But Sophie, you were part of my content and connection club. You had been learning from me as I had been figuring this out. And, Stacey was just talking about the launch party and me emceeing that. You had also been witness to some of this work I had done with Zoom. You knew you wanted to write a book and kind of knew you wanted to work with me in some capacity, but like,
Yeah.
how did you sort of decide that launching and writing reviews was all important? I mean, you have other marketing skills, so it wasn't like I didn't think you were going to just hit publish and never talk about the book. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're a marketing person, like, you'll at least talk about it. But how did the reviews factor in and the launch team and all of those things?
Yeah, having heard you talk about it, for a couple of years already, when you were launching your own books, way before you were actually a book launch coach, hearing your own process behind the scenes and all the things you were doing, and then whenever you made a mistake, be like, oh, okay, note to self, next time I'll do this way. So being there in seeing you develop all of this, I was learning and learning and learning, and then the importance of it, and seeing it grow. And then I watched when you were starting to coach people to do it, even before you were a book launch coach, but you were still helping people do it. So I'd seen you all along, and I knew that this whole process of reviews, I understood the longevity of it and the importance of it. So yes, I did all kinds of marketing things, like writing, sharing my chapters on LinkedIn and getting comments and all kinds of things that I did. But the specifics of the launch team and how to get all these reviews in, also, not just like posting it and or publishing it and then saying, hey, can you please, like, understanding the psychology behind getting people to send it to you, and all of those steps. I had seen every single one of those and the importance of them. So it was a no-brainer. I mean, I knew I'd work with you before, like, the minute I decided to write the book, you were already like hired, in a sense.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is interesting because I feel like we can also extrapolate sort of my brand building is I host networking events for free all the time. The one that I met Stacey through, I started hosting in July of 2020, and I've hosted every single month since. And it pulls together people from a few different online communities, like Dory Clark's Recognized Expert community and Michael Roderick's Gate community, and Innovation Women with Bobby Carlton's community from Innovation Women. So it really pulls from those three spaces. And so I kept hosting things there, and I shared a little bit about what I was learning as I was doing it. And then I had this for 2 years, this weekly call, No More Bad Zoom virtual happy hour, which is how Sophie and I really connected early in the pandemic. We had already met in person in 2019, but here we got to strengthen that relationship. And then that morphed into a mastermind with a co-working and a weekly mastermind called Content and Connection Club. And I'm very transparent in those calls, like extremely transparent about what's working and what's not and what I'm learning. Like, the first 10 minutes of each call is like me saying, like, here's what I'm trying to do this week. What do y'all think? Like, curtains pulled back.
Yeah.
So,
Great.
yeah, like Sophie seeing all that, I think some people feel like they have to hide their process because they're afraid to tell people when they're tinkering because it's not fixed yet, it's not perfect. But yet, Sophie, you seeing me figuring it out was partly what made you realize I knew something. And
Yeah.
Stacey, the reason I want to talk about the the free networking events is people think they have to pay to do ads or build these large funnels. And literally, like, we built up trust because I was hosting these gatherings. I'm not even sure how many you came to before that day. But enough that you and I had some familiarity from that space, so you were willing to stay on a call with me. Like, so I just think sometimes we feel like we have to do marketing in this sort of cold, like, push ads out kind of way. And if you think that's the case, you've got to read Sophie's book to find out all the other ways you can have a conversation with your audience. I want to just tell you both you did a great job, because getting 50 reviews is the goal that I set for my authors, because it really separates them from other books that have been published in their genre who didn't make any effort. A lot of thought leaders don't have enormous followings. Like, of course, there's the Brene Brown, there's the Dory Clark. There are the people who have these enormous followings. Simon Sinek, right? Like, in this case, it's people who have these great ideas, who understand how something works, and they're sharing it. Those thought leaders tend to not do a launch, and they don't even get 20 reviews. So I always aim for 50, but I always say that that's the goal. But the purpose is actually the conversations you're having with your launch team, and your launch team has these likely prospects and referral partners. So Stacey, you mentioned a little bit about this, about how you were able to pull together a list of hundreds of people who you thought would be interested in supporting you, not just because they're your friends and family and they love you, but because they actually understood the need for a book like this. What was that like, having that realization that you had this network behind you? Was it hard for you to pull together that list initially? Did you not believe it? And then you were like, oh, wow, yeah, okay, let's do this. Like, what's that evolution like as for you, the author?
Yeah, I don't think I realized how big the network was. I mean, I knew that I had a lot of connections, but I did not realize how many were there. And as we went through the review process, I was floored at how many people responded that of course they were willing to read the book because they were in my network and they knew that there would be something in there that they could take away from it. Not just they were doing me a favor. And I think originally when we start to try to get reviews, we think we're asking people for a favor. And it very quickly, from the way that you structured the questions that I could ask people and the forms that I could put together, it became clear why they were doing it. Yes, I had a relationship with them and they liked me, and to some extent they were helping me. But more than that, and most often the first comment was, well, I want to read this because I want to know what's in here that I can learn from. And I always learn when I talk to Stacey. She's always got some kind of interesting nugget or perspective. What's this one going to be? And that's what drove it, that sort of surprised me. I learned throughout the evolution of it that people are my fans, because I don't have it all figured out all the time, to your point earlier. But I say things that are provocative and different than what they might hear elsewhere. And they want to know those things. And I had not been leveraging that. Coming out of the launch, the way that I ended up increasing my sales of my offers was through all of those people saying, now I know how to talk about what Stacey's doing right now to these other people that I know. In the past, they're like, you should just know Stacey. And then those folks mostly don't call because there's nothing to hang on to. But now they had, through the launch process and through the book, very tangible things. You should read Stacey's book and give her a call. Or you should really pay attention to step 2 because I think what Stacey's saying is important for you. Mm-hmm. Or whatever that might be. And then people who really were a good match for me were the ones who reached out, and it resulted in sales.
That's awesome. And Sophie, for you, I know that this was you're like a LinkedIn branding expert person. That's how I know you, and
Mhm.
how now you're talking about this marketing, and which is like the larger sort of lens of the work that you were doing, and a
Mhm.
different approach to it. And so part of the book was coming up with some kind of offer that was more in line with the book than what you'd been previously doing.
Mhm.
And I did design an MC and handle the tech for your launch party, and something really astounding happened. We have a call to action moment. And one of the things I work really hard with the author from the first conversation we have, even in the prospect conversation, is trying to understand, like, well, what's the goal of this? Like, where are we trying to direct the reader? So the reader gets excited. What do they do next? How do they find you? And what can they do next with you? And so you had some ideas around that. And then we came up with some plans for the call to action at your launch party. Could you describe a little bit about how, like, what was your launch party, and then let's talk about the call to action. But let's first just
Mm.
lay the groundwork.
Yeah.
What was different, because you've seen other people have parties for their books where they're like,
Yeah.
oh my god, I did a thing, and that's like 40 minutes of them saying it, and that was not what you did at all.
Yeah. No, I think it was, well, just like you, Stacey, I was surprised at the number of people who signed up to be on my book launch team. It took me a long time to get to decide who I was going to even reach out to, because I have 7,000 connections on LinkedIn, and I wasn't going to reach out to 7,000 people. So anyway, I ended up with a launch team of, I think, 200 and something, which to me was like, what? Very, very surprising. So, and I really nurtured them throughout the whole process, which was a good 5, 6 months, I think. And what was I going to say? So the launch party, 115 people signed up for it, and I had done a training, free training, 2 weeks before, and had 40 people. And at the launch party, we had, I think it was 90 or something like
Yeah,
that,
90 people
that
were in the room.
stayed the whole time. So
Yeah.
the energy in the room was just incredible. And I had Simon Bowen, which was for me like, he actually came and spoke, which was just amazing. And I have been sharing his work for so many years that there were a lot of fans in the room as well. So they were blown away as well. So yeah, so I had a couple of past clients who shared their experience, the different ways that they had worked with me, and that was really lively and fun. And we had the usual distributing gifts and stuff. So I
Oh,
just
and
thought that.
I interviewed you also on
Oh
both of these.
yeah.
That's
Oh yeah.
one of the highlights for me, is
That's
interviewing the author during
absolutely.
these
Yeah, no, the
parties.
whole way you have the agenda laid out for the party is just genius. It works like clockwork. It's very active. It's very interactive. It's there's a change of pace. I mean, it's never boring for 1 second, which is, I before I knew your launch parties, I'd be like, launch party for a book, that sounds boring. Now I'm like, no, I'm going. So
Yeah.
so that was terrific. And then I wasn't too sure what my exact program was going to be. So we had a call to action, which was, I can't remember the word was, but it was basically get in touch with me if you want to learn about this program that I'm kind of sort of putting out there, still creating.
It was magnet.
It,
We had everyone write the word magnet because that's,
well,
a
that
big
makes
thing.
sense, doesn't it? That's the magnet model. So yeah, that makes a lot
Yeah,
of sense.
but it was basically they were gonna have a conversation with you about what you were developing, because you
Mm,
had some ideas, and you actually had sort of a two-stage process.
mm,
You had the bigger offer, but then you also had this idea of doing an author-led discussion.
mhm.
And I'd love you to share a little bit about that, because I do think that's like an in-between step.
Yeah.
There's way more people that would be interested in that
Mm,
than necessarily the people who are going to pay whatever the larger amount of money is to do the longer
yeah.
process.
That's a good point. It's interesting what you learn when you get in the habit of listening to your audience. I wrote the book. It took me months. It came out, and people were reading it, or they were at least saying that they had read it and had skimmed it and left a review and all this. So I had this kind of subconscious assumption that, okay, so people read the book, they understand the 9 strategies, that they're ready to implement it. And I talked to people and I realized, okay, so people have not necessarily read the entire book, and it's a lot. There's a lot in there. It's very dense. I mean, dense, hopefully not in a boring way, but that, like, there's a lot in there. And so I realized that people needed to learn more about the principles in the book itself, and learn and think about how it would apply for them. Because like I said before, it's not just a system, it's how is it going, you need to do marketing that's going to work for you. So there was this need to really consider the principles and see how they would work for you.
Mhm.
So I launched a 4-session fireside series, where we went through the principles in the book, and I basically asked a lot of questions and asked people, how would this work for you? What does this look like for you? What's your experience? And, I said, this is a safe space. There was a lot of vulnerability around, is this hard for you too? Yes, it's hard for me as well. So there was a lot of this deep conversation that created very solid bonds. And then from there, I launched an incubator, which was more, implementation.
I love this. I'm going to pull out a few things. One, 30 people put the word, including me, put the word magnet in chat during the party. And I usually tell authors, you'll get 6, maybe a dozen people responding. So 30 was amazing. And the fact that it was 30 of 90, it was like a third of the room. I mean, actually, that moment, I think it was half the room, if I recall, like as people were coming and going. I was like, this is an amazing percentage. And you had so many people who stayed there to the very, very end. And what you just described, this fireside chat thing, that is basically research calls on a scale. So
That's
you got so much information and you created this lovely space and they built trust with you. And then from that, you identified the people who'd be the best fit for the incubator, which is the more intense implementation part. So I have been using what you've done as an example. In fact, I'm working with David Newman right now. And one of the reasons he wanted to work with me on his launch was that he had heard what I had done with you. And he wanted to know, like, how could he figure out what his direct to consumer offer was? Because he didn't have that for this book.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, you don't have to go to this big offer. Like, here's how you could sort of step your way in. And it's not like he wants to meet one-on-one with everybody. Like, he doesn't have the time to meet with everybody one-on-one. So if he did these groups like you did, this 4-week thing, like, it's just another model. And Stacey, as we wrap up here, if you could just share, because I know this book has transformed your business. And you got an excellent story about this, because we were also doing some coaching together. You kind of, I don't want to say redid your, how do you describe, like, you basically found a way to get all this incredible work that you were already doing, like, under the same metaphor.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Tell me
Exactly.
about that and the results.
So I was doing consulting. I was doing one-on-one coaching sessions and 6-month coaching packages. And I was doing courses, online courses, in-person courses, workshops, and all of those things. They all had different names. They all were different slants. But they were, when we launched the book, you helped me to align all of them and think through what they should be named going forward, and how they could connect with and further the book for the person who's read the book and now wants to decide how they could work with me next. So my courses or workshops became leadership labs. How to empower your people, how to dance with the people that you work with. And I started describing it differently. I started talking about it differently. I started laying the marketing groundwork earlier, to, as we're talking about the book, to know what the customer experience is going to be and how they can start thinking, not just for a sell, but so that they can see the trajectory of how they can grow and what will be there to support them for the next piece, and thinking it through in that way. And by tying the metaphor together, they could see it more clearly. And I've also gone backwards. So in my one-on-one coaching, if someone reaches out to me for one-on-one coaching, the first thing I do is I say, I have this book. I would love to start by having you take a look at it and talking to me about what stood out to you, what's important to you, and having those kinds of conversations early and often. And it has helped the trajectory of people in my coaching programs to understand what
I
are
love
the
this for
first
you.
steps.
Yeah.
How do we get clear earlier so that they can build on those, and it's more brain friendly and it's more connected and organized versus feeling like behind door conversations a couple times a month. It connected everything.
Now you had some financial goals beginning of the year, and I remember you sharing some astounding news. So share that with us as we wrap up here.
By working with Robbie and launching this book, I added 3 organizations to my client base that I had not known before through referrals of my network based on the book launch. And I more than doubled my income last year.
Wow. That's hot. That's amazing. That's great. That's like everybody wants that kind of reaction to a book. Like in notice I didn't say, and how many copies of that book did you sell? And are you still at number one? You know, like all the things that don't matter. I love this for both of you. I love you to your future success is what I really want to hear. Sophie, how can people find you and follow your work? Because I know folks are going to want to stay in touch.
Yes, so you can look me up on LinkedIn and please connect. You can check out, well, I don't know, do I want to send people? My website needs to be revamped.
We'll get
Go
people there.
go to LinkedIn. Go to LinkedIn. That's
Fair enough.
I need to
We're going to
remove
put all these links in the show notes at bizbookpubhub.com. Stacey, where can people find you and follow your work?
You can find me on LinkedIn using EN, and if you throw the EDD in, you'll find me right away. Or I'm at authenticedge.com.
Fantastic. By the way, folks, also at bizbookpubhub.com, you're going to find show notes and links to all of our older episodes. We've got these amazing author panels and one-on-one interviews. Definitely check all of that out. And you'll see a curated directory of experts who support entrepreneurs in writing, editing, publishing, launching, and marketing their business book. We have Kindle flash sales that I organize 3 times a year that you can join as an author. There's another way to collaborate with authors and get your book out there. There's more. There's free virtual networking events. We have so much good stuff. So go over to bizbookpubhub.com. Thank you so much, Stacey and Sophie. So glad you were able to join us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robbie.